When I think of my village now, I see it through a soft morning mist. The sound of drums, the smell of wet earth, the laughter of children running with bare feet. That was my world once. I was born in Umuago, a quiet place near the river, surrounded by tall trees and stories older than any of us. My father was a respected man, strong and proud, and my mother worked with calm hands and a warm smile. We believed in our gods, our ancestors, and the power of the land that fed us. I grew up learning that silence was a kind of respect. Women spoke softly, never louder than the sound of their husband's voice. I did not question this when I was young. It was the air we breathed. My father used to say that a woman who asks too many questions loses her beauty. So I listened instead. I listened to the wind in the trees, the voices in the evening fire, and the quiet tears my mother sometimes wiped away when she thought no one was watching. When I was 16, I was promised to a man named Obi. He was not old, but older than me, and known for his strong arms and sharp temper. I was afraid of him, though I could not say why. When he came to our house with his people and gifts of yam, I smiled and looked down at the ground as my mother had taught me. Inside, I felt something turn cold. After the marriage, I went to live in Obi's compound, far from my mother. I worked from morning until night cooking, cleaning, carrying water from the river. Obi liked things done quickly. He often said that the sun does not wait for slow people. He had 2 other wives, both older than me. They spoke to me kindly, but I could feel their sadness. One of them told me quietly one evening that life becomes easier when you stop expecting joy. I remember thinking how strange it was to live without joy. One evening, months after I came to Obi's home, a strange sound filled the village. It was not the sound of drums or songs. It was the sound of a bell. People stopped working and looked toward the road. A group of men in white clothes had come from the next town. They carried books, crosses, and smiles that did not belong to our land. They spoke of a single God who loved everyone the same. I did not understand their words then, but I remember the way Obi's face tightened as he watched them. That night, he told us that these men were dangerous. He said their God would eat our gods, but some of the younger men in the village were curious. They went to listen to the strangers. Among them was my younger brother, Kelechi. He had always been quiet, more a dreamer than a farmer. My father used to call him weak, but Kelechi had eyes full of light, and when he spoke of the white men's God, it was as if he had found a secret. Soon things began to change. Some people stopped coming to the village meetings. Some began to speak of forgiveness instead of strength. I did not understand these new words, but I could feel the wind turning. The market women argued more often. The elders looked worried, and Obi grew more silent each day. One afternoon, I saw Kelechi again. He had not come home for weeks. When I saw him walking through the market, I felt both joy and fear. He smiled at me, but I could see that he was thinner now. He carried a small book and wore a cross around his neck. He said that peace had entered his heart, and that he no longer feared the gods. I wanted to hug him, but people were watching. That night, Obi came home angry. Someone had told him that I spoke to Kelechi in the market. He said that no wife of his would bring shame to his name by speaking to traitors. He called my brother a fool and said that the white men's God would destroy our world. I stayed silent because I had learned that silence was safer than truth. Days passed, and the village began to split. The old men said the earth was angry. The young men said the world was changing. The women whispered near the well. And in the evenings, when I looked up at the hills, I saw the white men building something a church, they said. Before we continue, I would love to know, where are you listening from? Which city, which country? Share it in the comments. And if you are enjoying this story, please subscribe to hear more emotional English stories every week. After some time, Kelechi stopped coming to our house at all. I missed him deeply. When I was a child, he used to tell me stories about the moon and the stars. He said that each person had a light inside, even if the world tried to cover it. I often thought of those words in the long, silent nights when Obi was angry or drunk. One day, everything changed. It was a bright morning, and I was washing clothes by the river. I heard loud voices coming from the path. Men were shouting. I ran toward the sound and saw a crowd near the big tree. My heart froze when I saw who was tied to the trunk, my brother. His face was calm, but his body was bruised. The elders had accused him of speaking against the spirits of our ancestors. I tried to run to him, but Obi caught my arm. He said I must not interfere. He said the gods demanded respect. My voice broke as I begged him to let me go. He looked at me as if I were a stranger. Then the drums began to beat. That night, the air felt empty. No songs, no laughter. Even the crickets were silent. The next morning, they said Kelechi was gone. No one spoke his name again. My mother's eyes turned gray with grief, and my father walked like a shadow. I went back to Obi's house, but something inside me had broken. Weeks passed, and the white men did not leave. They built schools, they built their church, and slowly they built walls between us. Some women began sending their children to the school. They said it was for learning letters and numbers. I wanted to send my son, too, but Obi forbade it. He said no child of his would kneel before strangers. But I could see the truth. Our world was changing. And I knew that one day we would have to choose between the world we were born into and the world that was coming for us. Before I continue with the story, please like, subscribe, share, and tell me in the comments where you are listening from. Your support means a lot. Now, let's continue. The weeks turned into months, and I began to see my village changing in quiet, strange ways. People still farmed, still went to the market, still sang their songs at night, but their hearts were no longer the same. The young people were curious about the new ways, and the old people were afraid of them. Every evening, when I walked home from the well, I saw children whispering words from the white men's book. They said it was the language of heaven. I often thought of my brother Kelechi. In my dreams, he stood by the river, smiling, holding the same book. When I woke up, I always felt both comfort and pain. I wondered if he had known this would happen, that everything we believed would slowly fall apart. Obi was not the same either. He used to walk proudly through the village, his head high, his steps firm. Now he walked with anger in his face. He spoke less, and when he did, his words were heavy. He said the white men's ways were a poison, and the young men were too weak to fight it. Sometimes he went to the elders' meetings late into the night, returning with eyes that looked tired and wild. One evening, he came home and said that the elders had decided to destroy the white men's church. He said it stood on sacred ground and that the spirits were angry. My heart began to beat fast. I knew the men who prayed there now. Some were my friends. Some were women I once shared food with at the market. They were not bad people. They were only looking for peace. But I said nothing. The next day, I heard shouting again. Smoke rose from the edge of the village. The men had burned the church. For a short time, the people felt proud again. They said the gods would be pleased. But that pride did not last long. A week later, men from the white men's court arrived. They were not smiling this time. They took 5 of our leaders away, including Obi. I stood by the road as they led them away with ropes around their wrists. My heart broke inside me, but I could not move. My husband turned his face away from me as they pushed him forward. For many days, he did not come back. I went to his family, to the elders, to anyone who would listen, but nobody knew what to do. The white men had taken them to another town. I waited and waited. Every sound in the night made me hope it was his steps. When Obi returned, he was not the same man. His back was marked with scars, and his eyes were darker. He said nothing for 2 days. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and full of pain. He said they had been beaten, laughed at, and called animals. They had to bow before men they did not know. He said that he would never again be made to kneel like a dog. From that day, a coldness entered our home. He looked at me as if I were part of the world that betrayed him. Sometimes I tried to speak to him, to remind him of our son, our family, our fields, but he would turn away. I began to live in silence again, doing my work and keeping my thoughts inside me. Then, one afternoon, when the air was heavy with rain, a man came to our compound. He wore clean clothes and carried a Bible under his arm. It was one of the teachers from the new school. He said he came with good news. The white men had opened a class for women to learn letters and counting. He said even mothers could learn now. I looked at him with surprise. I had never thought of learning. All my life I had worked with my hands, not with words. But when he spoke of reading stories and writing names, I felt something warm inside. Before I could answer, Obi came out. His voice was hard. He told the man never to come again. The man bowed slightly and left. That night, I sat outside while Obi slept. The moon was full, and I could hear the soft cry of the night birds. I thought of my brother again, of his gentle voice and the light in his eyes. Maybe he had seen something that the rest of us were too afraid to see. Maybe the world was not ending. Maybe it was changing. The next week, when Obi went to the fields, I went to the school. It was in a small hut near the new church. My hands trembled when I walked inside. There were other women there, old, young, widowed, married. We all looked shy and nervous. The teacher smiled and said, "We will begin with names." He wrote my name on a small slate board and told me to copy it. I had never held chalk before. My fingers were rough and unsure, but when I finished, the white mark on the board looked beautiful to me. I whispered my name again and again, Nena. For the first time, it felt like something that belonged to me. I began going to the school whenever I could. Sometimes I told Obi I was visiting my mother. Sometimes I went after dark when he was sleeping. Each time I learned a new word, I felt stronger, like a tree finding roots in new soil. But secrets cannot stay hidden forever. One evening, as I came home from the school, I found Obi waiting by the door. His eyes were hard, and the belt in his hand was shaking. He asked where I had been. My voice was small when I told him the truth. He did not speak at first. Then he asked if I had forgotten who I was, if I thought I was better than the women of our ancestors. I said no, that I only wanted to learn so I could help our son in the future. His voice rose, and he said that a woman who follows new ways loses her soul. I looked at him then, and for the first time I did not look away. That night he did not eat. The next morning he left for the elders' meeting and did not return until night. I waited by the fire, my heart heavy. I did not know what would happen next. Days later, soldiers came again from the white men's court. They said the men who burned the church must pay with more than yams. They said the white men wanted peace, but peace under their rule. The elders argued, but nothing changed. We were no longer our own people. One morning, I went to the market and saw women from another village. They spoke of war, not the kind with drums and spears, but a quiet war. A war of schools, churches, and rules written on power. Our ways, they said, were dying, and soon the old songs would be forgotten. I walked home that day, feeling as if I were standing between two rivers, one pulling me forward, one pulling me back. I loved my people, my land, my husband, and our gods. But I also wanted to understand this new world. I wanted my son to have choices that I never had. When I reached home, my son was sitting near the fire, drawing lines in the dust with a stick. He looked up and said, "Mama, what is my name in letters?" My heart filled with something I could not explain. I took the stick and showed him, slowly, one shape after another, just as my teacher had shown me. He smiled. That smile gave me courage. That night, as Obi slept, I lay awake, the moonlight fell across the floor, and I thought of all that had been lost, my brother, our peace, the songs of our ancestors. But I also thought of what might still be saved, our hearts, our kindness, our hope. I did not know then that the next morning would change everything again. The morning that changed everything began quietly. The sky was gray, and a light mist covered the village. I woke early before the roosters and went outside to sweep the yard. The air felt heavy, as if something unseen waited in the wind. Obi was still asleep. I listened to his slow breathing and felt both love and distance, two things that can live in the same heart. After sunrise, people began to move along the path toward the village square. I heard someone say that the white men's soldiers had returned. My heart began to beat fast. I took my son by the hand and followed the others. When we reached the square, I saw the soldiers standing near the elders. Their clothes were clean, their faces hard. Behind them stood one of the teachers from the school, holding a book. The leader spoke loudly, saying that the people must now follow the new law. The land, he said, would belong to the white men's court, and all villages must pay tax to the government in the town. The crowd was silent. These words were heavy and strange. To us, land was not something you could buy or sell. It was the earth of our ancestors, the place of our stories. Then I heard a voice rise from the crowd. Obi's. His voice was strong, even after all the pain he had known. He said our land would never belong to strangers. He said no man could own the soil that fed his children. The soldiers told him to be quiet, but he did not stop. I saw one of them raise his gun. In that moment, everything seemed to slow. I remember the cry of a child, the rustle of leaves, the sudden shout. Then the sound of the gun. Obi fell to the ground. For a second, the whole world stood still. My son screamed. I ran to Obi, my hands shaking. His eyes were open, but he was not there anymore. They told us later that it was an accident, that the soldier had only wanted to frighten him. But I knew better. Something deeper had been broken not only in my family but in the heart of the village. The men who had once been proud now walked like ghosts. The women wept quietly as they worked in the fields. After the burial, I stayed alone for many days. My mother came to visit me and tried to comfort me, but her own eyes were tired from too many losses. I thought about everything that had happened: my brother, my husband, my people, and I felt as if I were standing at the edge of two worlds. One was the world of the past, filled with voices and songs that were fading away. The other was the world that was coming, full of new sounds, new words, and a kind of silence that frightened me. I did not know which world to belong to anymore, but I knew I had to live. For my son and for myself, I went back to the small school near the church. The teacher looked surprised when he saw me. I told him that I wanted to continue learning. I said that I wanted to understand the new world so that it could not hurt me again. He nodded and gave me a book. I began again, one letter at a time, one word at a time. Every day after that, I went to the school in the morning and worked in the fields in the afternoon. Some people whispered about me. They said I was a woman without respect, a woman who forgot her place. But others began to follow. Soon there were more women in the class: widows, young girls, even a few old mothers who wanted to learn their names. At first, it was only about words and numbers, but soon it became more. We read stories, simple ones about people who lost and found their way. Sometimes, when I read about distant lands, I imagined that my brother was still alive somewhere, far away, living in peace. That thought made me stronger. One afternoon, I sat outside the school, reading under a tree. My son came running with a letter in his hand. It was from a man in the town, one of the white teachers. He said they needed someone to help teach the younger children in the new village school. My heart jumped. I could not believe they were asking me. That night, I sat by the fire and looked at the stars. I thought of Obi's voice, deep and angry, saying no man could own the land. I thought of Kalichi's soft words, saying peace lived inside the heart. I realized that both of them had been right in their own way. Obi had fought for the past, Kalechi had reached for the future, and I stood between them, carrying both in my heart. I decided to go. The next morning, I took my son and a small basket of food. Before leaving, I walked to the river one last time. The water was calm, and the reflection of the sky looked like silver glass. I knelt down and touched the surface gently. I whispered to my ancestors, to my mother, to Obi, to Kalechi, and asked them to forgive me for walking a new path. I told them I would not forget them, that their names would live in every word I taught. Then I stood up and began the long walk toward the town. The road was dusty, and the sun burned my shoulders, but I did not feel tired. Along the way, I met children carrying books, women selling fruit, and men speaking in both our language and the white men's. The world was changing before my eyes, and for the first time, I did not fear it. When I reached the school, the children were playing outside. Their laughter filled the air like music. The head teacher welcomed me and showed me a small table where I would work. On the table was a book with a picture of a tree on the cover. He said it was a storybook for children. I opened it and began to read aloud. The first line said, "Once there was a girl who learned to find her voice." I smiled because I knew that girl could have been me. As days turned into weeks, I began to teach not only letters and numbers, but also the songs of our people. I told the children about the river, the moon, and the stories my mother had told me. I taught them to love both the old and the new. Some of the white teachers did not like that, but I did not stop. I told the children that a person without roots cannot stand tall, and a person without learning cannot see far. They listened with bright eyes. I saw hope in them, the same hope I had once lost. Sometimes, when I walked home in the evening, I could still hear the drums in the distance. Fainter now, but still alive. And I knew that even though much had fallen apart, something in us had survived. Years later, when I was old, people still called me the woman who crossed two worlds. They said I brought the letters of the white men to our village, but also kept the songs of our ancestors alive. I liked that. It made me feel that nothing was truly lost, only changed. One evening, my grown son came to me with a letter. He had been accepted to study in the city. He said he wanted to learn about medicine, to heal people. My eyes filled with tears as I read the letter. I thought of all the years of pain and change, and I whispered a quiet prayer of thanks. That night, as I sat outside under the stars, I felt the wind move through the trees, soft, steady, full of life. I knew my brother and my husband were part of that wind, watching over us. I smiled and said softly, "Things fall apart, but we rise again." If you liked my story, please like, comment, and share.